Hi friends! Welcome to Canary at Home. I'm Lacey, and today we're going to be making clay coil pots with a Modge Podge glaze. So the material that we'll be mainly working with today is clay. So what is clay? Clay is a type of fine-grained soil that contains special minerals, and it develops plasticity or softness when it gets wet. And where does it come from? Well, soil comes from the earth, and you can find this special type of soil in places where rivers or streams used to flow. And what do we use clay for? Well, clay is a three-dimensional sculptural material, and you can form it into almost any type of form to create any type of object or sculpture that you want. But we also can find clay objects all around us that we use every day. Did you know that bricks are made of clay? Bricks that build our houses. We can also find lots of clay objects, or ceramics they call them, in our kitchens. Plates, bowls, cups, vessels of all kinds are made of clay. Today we are going to make a vessel. A vessel is a container that is hollow inside. Vessels could be cups, vases, bowls, pots. Today we're going to make a coil pot. We're going to use a technique of coiling to build up our vessel. In your materials pack, you'll have a big hunk of clay, a canvas mat, 3 liquid watercolors, a pot of Modge Podge, and a paint and glue brush. Additionally, from home you might need a little cup of water, some tape to tape down your canvas, and just a small tool. It could be a little toothpick or a popsicle stick, or even a plastic butter knife. So let's get started. You're gonna dilute your liquid watercolor with a couple tablespoons of water. Not too much. The more water you add, the lighter your color will be. So after you've taped down your clay mat, you can pinch off a little bit of the clay. Now notice, how does it feel? When I pinch it, it feels a little bit squishy, kind of soft, but not as soft as like Play-Doh, a little harder than that. It's cool to the touch. Clay absorbs temperature, so it's cool to the touch, and then it will absorb the warmth in your hands. How can you change it with your hands? You can smooth it by running your finger over. You can flatten it by applying pressure. You can roll it up. You can poke it. All the different ways that you act on the clay with your hands change the form of the material. For our coil pot, we're going to need to start with a base. The base is the bottom, the foundation of the pot, for which the rest of the coils are built on top. So the size of your base is going to determine the size of your coil pot in part. It's gonna determine how wide it is or how narrow it is. So I'm gonna take this piece that I have pinched off. I'm gonna pinch off a little bit of this because it feels a little large for the base that I want, and put that with the rest of my clay. And then I'm gonna start to form a round shape by applying pressure to flatten it, and also smoothing the sides to create this sort of round circular base. You don't want your base to be too thin. You want it to have a little bit of weight so that it will support your pot. If you have tools at home, like a rolling pin, sometimes they can help get it nice and flat. But if you don't, your hands work just fine. After I get my base just the way I like it, I'm gonna put it to the side, and then I'm gonna grab a new piece of clay, maybe a little smaller than that first chunk that I grabbed. Okay, so you have your new piece of clay. You're gonna kind of elongate it a little by pinching it out. That will help you get started with your coil. A coil is like a cylindrical form, like a snake. And you wanna roll your coils out. It's a lot of fun to roll these coils out until they get longer and longer and thinner. As you can see, I'm kind of moving my fingers to the edges as I roll, and that's creating an evenness to my coils. I'm gonna make it a little bit longer. That seems about right to me. You can kind of like smooth it out. So the way that you start to build your coil pot up is by taking your coil and coiling it, wrapping it around that base shape. And that will start to create a wall. Now you'll have to find a way to attach that coil to the base. There's a couple ways to do it. One way is that you can smush that coil all the way around, and it will create this sort of transition from one piece to another. You'd have to go all the way around to do that. Smush, smush, smush it together. Another way that you can attach it is to do something called scoring, and that is when you create a texture in the clay, add some water, and stick the pieces together, it becomes like glue. So just creating like a rough texture with my tool all the way around the clay base. You could even do it on your coil if you want to be super thorough. And those textures, those sort of teeth will kind of bind into each other. I'm going to take some water and apply the water all around that texture. And then place it on top. And that will really bind those two pieces of clay together. And you notice you might have some of those texture imperfections around. You might like that, or if you want to smooth them out, now's the time to take your finger and just kind of smooth around. And then you're going to repeat that whole process, one coil at a time, as you build the layers up to create the size vessel that you want. Okay, so I have built up my coil pot as tall as I want it to go. Now you are welcome to go higher or lower. The shape is completely up to you. That's your artistic style. I've built mine up as much as I want, and now I could go in and I could smooth out any parts that I don't want to be bumpy. That's one thing I could do next. And another thing that I could do is to create some details. So some vessels have handles, some vessels have decorative details. So those are choices that you can make as an artist, and especially if you have extra clay, then you can decide how you want to embellish your pot to make it unique. Sometimes I like to show artists how they can personalize their pot. So what's the first letter of your name? First letter of my name is an L. So I'm going to create a coil and turn it into the letter L. So I could score that on the back and attach it to the front of my vessel. And then it's a personalized pot. Or you could create handles for your pot, kind of like a mug. Make sure you smush those pieces together or score it really well. Or you could create little decorative forms that you attach to different parts of your pot. So I'm gonna make a nice smooth ball. Maybe I'll make many of these and attach them to the edge of the vessel. How you embellish your pot will make it unique to you. Now, after you have completed your building of your coil pot and the form is exactly the way that you want it, then you are going to leave it to dry. This is air dry clay. That means that the air will dry it up and make it hard. There's clays that you can fire in a hot oven called a kiln, but we don't all have kilns at home, right? So the air dry clay will work just fine for our coil pot. You're gonna leave that to dry at least overnight, and then you're gonna come back to paint it. This is a pot that I constructed yesterday. It sat out overnight. Now it's nice and hard. And it's time to add our Modge Podge glaze. Now a glaze is a type of sealant in ceramics that seals up the clay and actually makes it smooth and it makes it hold water. So if you put water in this clay pot, it would actually seep right through. But if you were to glaze it, then it would hold water. Now our glaze is not a real glaze. A real glaze has to be fired in that hot oven called a kiln. But we're gonna make kind of a fake glaze that looks shiny and seals up the texture of the clay. You will not be able to use these to hold water. So this is the Modge Podge. Modge Podge is a type of glue that will dry clear and give your pot a glossy coating. I'm gonna take some Modge Podge, get it on my brush, and I'm gonna start to brush that onto my clay pot. You can kind of seal it all around, and you notice that it's white right now, but when this dries, it will dry kind of clear. Now, as you are sealing up that clay with the Modge Podge, feel free, in any order you want, to add some color to it. So you'll be applying coats of both the Modge Podge and the paint. You can do it either one at a time, or you can kind of do it simultaneously. That liquid watercolor will mix into your Modge Podge glaze and create really nice colors. Now I'm gonna get a new color. Now once you've sealed up and painted the outside of your coil pot, don't forget the inside. Now, as you can see, the clay really absorbs those materials quickly, and you can see that it's already starting to dry, those first parts that I have sealed up, and it's nice and shiny. Now, the more layers of color and Modge Podge you add, the brighter and the shinier and the more actually sealed it will be. So feel free to add your whole container of Modge Podge. It will dry beautifully. Once it's dry, you can see the color is bright, and the sheen is nice and shiny, and you have a glazed, air dry, clay coil pot. I like to use mine to hold pencils or brushes or art materials. All right, friends, now it's your turn. I can't wait to see how yours turn out. Please share pictures of your work with us at Canary Art on Instagram, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Bye. Hey grown-ups, I just want to say a couple things about this process. First of all, building a coil pot is a little more advanced. Some kids as young as 3, if they've had experience with clay, will be able to do it on their own. But if they have not had experience with the clay, they might be more interested in just seeing how clay changes with their hands and their actions, poking things into it. So feel free to let them go in that direction and make a sculpture with their clay in more of a free form. Feel free to give them as much assistance as they need to build this coil pot. Kids, I'd say mostly 5 and older will be able to do this no problem and take it in really interested directions. And you have this beautiful canvas mat. After you finish with your project, a bonus is that you can use your watercolor to paint on it.